An Apache woman struggled to cut wood in deadly snow until a cowboy asked, "Can I help you?" The snow had been falling since before sunrise, thick and heavy, covering the land in silence. The sky was a dull gray, and the wind moved like a sharp knife through the open valley. Trees stood stiff and frozen, their branches bent under the weight of ice. Every sound felt distant, swallowed by the storm. In this harsh winter world, an Apache woman moved slowly through the snow, her boots sinking with every step. She was alone. Her name did not matter here. What mattered was survival. She pulled her worn coat tighter around her body, though it did little to stop the cold. The fabric was old, patched many times and stiff from frost. Her breath came out in short white clouds as she reached the small woodpile near her cabin. The pile was smaller than it should have been, much smaller. She stared at it for a moment, her jaw tight, her eyes steady but tired. Winter did not care about plans or hope. Winter only cared about strength. She picked up the axe with both hands. The handle was rough and cold, biting into her palms even through her gloves. Her fingers were already numb, but she could not stop. If she did not cut enough wood today, the fire would die tonight. If the fire died, the cold would win. She placed a frozen log upright and raised the axe. The first swing was weak. The axe struck the wood but did not split it. She exhaled slowly, adjusted her stance, and tried again. This time the axe cut deeper, cracking the log. She lifted it again, putting what little strength she had left into the swing. Crack! The log split in two. She did not smile. There was no joy in this work, only necessity. She bent down, lifted one half of the log, and stacked it near the cabin wall. Her knees ached as she stood back up. The cold had settled deep into her bones, the kind of cold that did not leave easily. The wind picked up, pushing snow against her face. She turned slightly, shielding her eyes with her arm, and continued working. This land had always been unforgiving, but she knew it well. She had grown up learning how to read the sky, how to listen to the wind, how to survive with very little. Her people had lived through far worse than this storm. That thought gave her strength, but it did not warm her hands. Another log, another swing. Her arms burned now, each movement slower than the last. She could feel the strain in her shoulders, the stiffness in her back. Still, she kept going. Stopping was not an option. The cabin behind her was small, made of old wood and stone. Smoke barely rose from the chimney, thin and weak, fighting against the wind. Inside, the fire was low. She had checked it before coming out. There were only a few hours of warmth left. She glanced toward the horizon. The storm showed no signs of easing. The snow fell just as hard, the sky just as dark. She worked faster. The axe slipped slightly in her grip as her gloves grew wet. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from effort. She rested the axe head on the log for a moment, leaning on the handle. Her breath came heavier now, and she closed her eyes briefly. Memories tried to surface, warm fires, voices, laughter, but she pushed them away. Thinking too much could make her careless. Careless meant hurt. Hurt meant helpless. She opened her eyes and lifted the axe again. This time her foot slid. It was a small slip, but enough to throw her balance off. She stumbled forward, catching herself just before she fell. The axe dropped into the snow with a dull thud. Her heart jumped and she stood frozen for a moment, listening. Only the wind answered. She slowly bent down and picked up the axe. Her hands were shaking now, not just from cold, but from the reminder of how close danger always was. Out here, one mistake could cost everything. She straightened and looked at the pile of wood she had already cut. It still wasn't enough. A wave of exhaustion washed over her. Her shoulders slumped just for a second. She pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to stop. She had stopped before in other winters, telling herself she would finish later. Later had almost cost her life once. Not again. She thought of her mother, who had taught her never to wait for rescue. She thought of her grandmother, who had survived winters with nothing but will and fire. Their voices were not loud, but they were firm. Keep going. She raised the axe once more. The sound of the blade striking wood echoed softly through the storm. Chop by chop, the pile slowly grew. Each piece of wood felt heavier than the last. Her arms moved like they belonged to someone else. Time blurred. She did not know how long she worked, minutes or hours. The cold crept deeper and her movements grew slower. Her breath fogged her vision and ice clung to her eyelashes. At some point, she realized she could no longer feel her fingers. That frightened her more than the storm. She stopped and rubbed her hands together hard, trying to bring feeling back into them. Pain shot through her fingers as sensation returned, sharp and burning. She welcomed it. Pain meant life. She looked around again. The land was empty, white, endless. No neighbors nearby, no roads close enough to matter, just snow, trees, and sky. Alone. She bent down for another log, but her knees nearly gave out. She caught herself on the axe handle, breathing hard. Her chest felt tight, her strength nearly gone. Still, she did not cry out. She had learned long ago that the land did not answer cries. She forced herself upright and placed the log carefully. The axe felt heavier now, like it was made of stone. She lifted it halfway, then lowered it again. Her arms trembled. She closed her eyes. Just one more, she told herself. Just one more log. She swung. The axe struck the wood but bounced off, barely leaving a mark. She stared at it, frustration flashing through her calm expression. Her jaw clenched, and she raised the axe again with everything she had left. The swing was slow. The wind howled louder, as if warning her. She missed. The axe struck the snow instead, sending powder into the air. The sudden movement threw her off balance and she fell to one knee. Cold soaked through her pants instantly. She stayed there, kneeling in the snow, breathing hard. For the first time that day, doubt crept in. What if she could not finish? What if she could not get back up? What if the fire went out tonight? She pushed the thoughts away, but they left a mark. Slowly, carefully, she stood. Her body protested every movement. Her legs felt weak, her head light. She looked at the cabin again. The distance felt farther now. The storm did not care. She took a step toward the axe, then another. Her movements were cautious, deliberate. She bent down, picked it up, and leaned on it like a walking stick for a moment. Then she heard it. A sound that did not belong to the storm. It was faint at first, almost lost in the wind. A soft crunch. Then another. Her head snapped up. She turned slowly, eyes scanning the white blur around her. Her heart beat faster, not with fear but alertness. Out here, unexpected sounds could mean danger. The crunch came again, clearer now. Footsteps. She tightened her grip on the axe handle, her body tense despite the exhaustion. She squinted into the falling snow, trying to see through the curtain of white. A shape moved in the distance. Not a tree, not an animal, a person. Her breath caught in her throat. She did not move. She did not call out. She simply watched as the figure came closer, stepping carefully through the snow. As the distance closed, she could make out more details. A wide hat, a heavy coat, the shape of boots. A cowboy. He stopped a few steps away, careful not to startle her. Snow clung to his coat and hat, and his face was weathered by years of wind and sun. He looked at her, then at the axe, then at the small pile of wood. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and steady. "Can I help you?" The storm continued to fall around them, but in that moment everything felt still. She did not answer right away. The snow kept falling, soft but heavy, filling the silence between them. The cowboy stood still, not stepping closer, not reaching for the axe. He waited. His hands were open at his sides, empty. He did not look at her like she was weak. He looked at her like she was tired. That mattered. The Apache woman studied him carefully. Out here, trust was not given easily. Strangers could mean trouble. Even kindness sometimes came with hidden weight. Her grip tightened around the axe handle, though her arms were shaking from cold and strain. "I'm fine," she said at last. Her voice was calm, but it carried the edge of pride and warning. It was a voice shaped by many winters. The cowboy nodded slowly, as if he expected that answer. He did not smile. He did not argue, he simply glanced toward the sky where the clouds pressed low and dark. "This storm's got teeth," he said. "Gets worse before night." She already knew that. She did not reply. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved around them, pushing snow across the ground in thin waves. The world felt wide and empty, and yet the space between them felt very small. She lowered the axe slightly, not in surrender but in relief. Her body could not hold tension much longer. Her knees ached and her fingers burned again as feeling returned. She shifted her weight, careful not to slip. The cowboy noticed. He noticed everything, the way she stood, the stiffness in her shoulders, the short way she breathed. He had seen this before, not this woman but this kind of fight, people against weather, people against limits. "My name's Tom," he said, keeping his voice easy. "I live a few miles east." She nodded once. "I know the place." That surprised him, but he hid it well. She did not offer her name. Names carried stories, and she was not ready to share hers. Tom took off his gloves and rubbed his hands together. The skin was rough, cracked from cold and work. He looked toward the woodpile again. "You been at this a while," he said. She followed his gaze. The pile looked small against the wide white ground. It was not enough for the night, she knew it, he knew it too. "I'll manage," she said. Tom did not challenge her words. He respected them, but he also respected truth. "I don't doubt that," he said. "But managing doesn't mean doing it alone." She looked at him then, really looked. His eyes were clear. There was no push in his stance, no rush in his voice. He was not trying to prove anything. Her mind drifted, pulled backward by memory. She remembered other winters. Colder ones, hungrier ones. She remembered being a child, watching her mother split wood with hands just as tired as hers were now. Her mother had never asked for help, not because help was wrong, but because help was not always safe. She remembered promises made and broken. Smiles that hid hard truths, people who offered warmth then took something in return. Her jaw tightened. "I didn't ask," she said quietly. Tom nodded again. "I know." The wind rose, stronger now. Snow stung her face and she turned slightly away from it. Her boots were soaked, her legs numb from the knee down. She shifted again and pain shot through her calf. She bit down on it, refusing to show weakness. Tom saw it anyway. He stepped back a little, giving her more space, not less. "I got a saw on my horse," he said. "Faster than an axe, if you want." She hesitated. Every part of her training told her to say no, to finish what she started, to endure. Endurance was a kind of honor, but another voice, quieter and older, spoke too. The voice of survival. The voice that said pride did not keep fires burning. She looked at the cabin again. Smoke barely moved from the chimney now. Night would come early in this storm. "How long?" she asked. Tom understood the question. Not how long would it take to cut the wood, but how long would he stay? How long would the help last? How much would it cost? "However long it takes," he said. "No more, no less." She searched his face for something false. She found none. Slowly, she set the axe down in the snow. The motion felt heavy with meaning. Her hands felt empty without it. "All right," she said. The word felt strange in her mouth. Tom gave a short nod, then turned toward his horse, which stood a short distance away, head low against the wind. He moved with care, sure-footed and calm. The horse snorted softly as he reached for the saw. She watched him work, her breath slowing as her body finally allowed itself to rest. She leaned against the cabin wall, the wood cold against her back but steady. Her legs trembled now that the effort had stopped. She hated that feeling. While Tom worked, her thoughts wandered again. She had built this life piece by piece. This cabin, this routine, this quiet. It was not much, but it was hers. She lived far from town on purpose. Distance meant peace. Distance meant control. People did not see how much strength it took to live like this. They saw isolation and assumed loneliness. They saw struggle and assumed failure. They were wrong. The sound of the saw cut through the storm, steady, sure. Wood fell cleanly, split with skill born of years, not force. Tom stacked the pieces neatly, respecting the way she had already arranged them. That too mattered. She watched from the corner of her eye, noticing small things. He did not waste energy. He did not rush. He did not complain about the cold. His movements were quiet, efficient, almost thoughtful. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to warm her core. Her fingers tingled painfully as heat slowly returned. "You been out here long?" Tom asked without looking up. "All my life," she answered. He nodded, accepting that. "Land like this teaches you." "Yes," she said, "it does." Another log fell. The pile grew. She felt something unfamiliar loosen in her chest, not weakness, something else. The weight of carrying everything alone easing just a little. She did not like the feeling, but she did not hate it either. The wind eased for a brief moment and the snow fell straight down instead of sideways. In that calm, she heard her own breathing again. Slower now. Deeper, she pushed away from the wall and stood upright, though her legs still felt unsteady. "Careful," Tom said gently. She bristled at the word, then realized he was not talking to her spirit, only her body. "I know," she said. He smiled then, just a little, not in victory. Not in pride, just understanding. The storm would go on. The cold would stay. Life would remain hard. But for this moment, she was not alone. And that realization stayed with her long after the saw kept cutting and the woodpile grew high enough to last the night. The work went on steadily. The sound of the saw cutting through wood mixed with the wind, creating a rhythm that felt almost calming. The pile of chopped wood grew taller, wider, stronger, like a small wall against the cold. The Apache woman stood nearby, watching, her hands slowly regaining warmth as she rubbed them together. Every few moments, she shifted her weight, testing her legs, reminding herself she was still standing. Tom finally stopped and wiped snow from his beard. He looked at the sky again. The light was fading faster now, the kind of early darkness that only winter storms bring. "We should move this closer to the door," he said. "Easier for you tonight," she nodded. "I usually do." Together, without speaking much, they began carrying the wood. She took smaller pieces at first, embarrassed by how heavy they felt. Tom noticed but said nothing. He simply adjusted, taking the larger loads himself. Their steps lined up naturally, like people who had worked side by side before, even though they had not. As they worked, she felt something strange, comfort not from warmth but from rhythm, from shared effort, from not having to explain herself. "You live alone?" Tom asked quietly. "Yes. Always have," she paused, then shook her head. "Not always." He did not ask more. He understood silence. Silence had its own language. They stacked the wood neatly by the cabin door. The closer they worked, the more she noticed small details about him. The way he placed each piece carefully so it would not fall. The way he kept checking the ground before stepping. The way his voice never rose above the wind. When the last log was set down, Tom straightened and took a slow breath. "That should do it," he said. "Enough to keep the fire strong." She looked at the stack. It was more than enough. Relief washed over her, so strong it almost made her dizzy. "Thank you," she said. The words came easier than she expected. "You're welcome." The storm pushed harder again, snow swirling thick around them. Tom glanced toward his horse, then back at the cabin. "You should get inside," he said. "Warm up." She nodded, then hesitated. Something pulled at her, something she had not felt in a long time. "You can come in," she said carefully. "Just for a minute to warm your hands." He paused. Respect was clear in his eyes. "Only if you're sure," he said. "I am." Inside, the cabin was dim but warm enough to feel safe. The fire crackled softly, weak but alive. She added a few fresh logs and the flames grew stronger, brighter. Shadows danced on the walls. Tom removed his hat and gloves, standing near the fire. Steam rose from his coat as the cold began to release its grip. She watched him from across the room, leaning against the table. The cabin was simple, no extra things, only what was needed. A small table, 2 chairs, a bed against the far wall. Everything had a place. "You built this yourself?" Tom asked. "Yes," He nodded with quiet respect. It's solid. That word stayed with her. She poured hot water into 2 cups and handed one to him. Their fingers brushed for just a second. She felt the warmth of his skin, real and grounding. They sat not too close, not too far. The fire filled the silence again. "You don't get many visitors," Tom said gently. "No, doesn't seem to bother you." She thought about that. "It does," she said honestly, "just not the way people think." He smiled, understanding more than she expected. They talked then, not about big things but small ones. The weather, the land, how winter had been harsher than usual, how animals moved differently when storms came early. She found herself listening more than guarding. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing slowed. The fear she carried every winter night eased its grip just a little. When Tom stood to leave, she felt a quiet pull again, but she did not stop him. "I'll check on you tomorrow," he said. "If the storm clears," she nodded. "I'll be here." He stepped outside, the cold rushing back in before the door closed. She watched through the small window as he mounted his horse and disappeared into the white. The fire crackled strong now. The cabin held warmth. The night no longer felt so heavy. She sat by the fire holding her cup and realized something important. Strength had many shapes, and sometimes letting someone stand beside you did not take strength away, it added to it. Morning came slowly, as if the land itself was tired. The storm had softened during the night, leaving behind a deep blanket of snow that covered everything in quiet white. Pale light slipped through the small cabin window, touching the walls and the floor. The Apache woman woke before the sun fully rose, as she always did. Habit did not leave easily. The fire was still alive. She sat up and looked toward the hearth. The flames were low but steady, fed by the wood stacked the day before. Warmth filled the cabin, gentle and safe. For a long moment, she simply watched the fire, listening to its soft sound. It felt like a gift she had not expected. She stood slowly, her body stiff but rested. Her legs still ached and her hands were sore, but the deep exhaustion from the day before had eased. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped closer to the fire, holding her hands out to it. Her thoughts returned to yesterday. The cowboy. Tom. She did not often think about people after they left. Most passed through her life like weather, brief, distant, gone. But his presence lingered, not because of what he said, but because of what he did not say. He had helped without trying to change her. That was rare. She pushed the thought aside and went about her morning routine. She heated water, washed her face, and prepared simple food. Outside, the world was quiet, almost peaceful after the storm. Snow rested heavy on the trees, bending their branches low. After she finished eating, she put on her boots and coat. The cold greeted her immediately as she opened the door, sharp but manageable. She stepped out and scanned the land around her. The sky was lighter now, pale blue breaking through the clouds. She checked the woodpile. It was strong and full, stacked neatly. She ran her hand over the rough surface of the logs, feeling gratitude rise again, uninvited but welcome. She spent the morning clearing snow from the path near the cabin, moving carefully, not pushing herself too hard. The land demanded respect, especially after a storm. She worked slowly, listening to the quiet. Birds had not returned yet, even they knew to wait. As the sun climbed higher, she heard a sound in the distance. Hooves. She stopped and straightened, resting her shovel against her leg. The sound grew clearer. She did not feel alarm this time. Instead, she felt something close to curiosity. Tom appeared over the small rise, riding at an easy pace. He waved once, not loudly, just enough to be seen. She raised her hand in return. He dismounted a short distance away and tied his horse to a tree. He approached on foot, boots crunching in the snow. "Morning," he said, "morning. You make it through the night all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "The fire stayed strong." He nodded, pleased. "Good." They stood there for a moment, neither rushing the conversation. The quiet between them felt natural now, not heavy. "I brought a little extra," he said, reaching into a saddlebag and pulling out a small bundle. coffee and some dried food, in case the road stays blocked. She hesitated, then accepted it. "Thank you. You don't have to," he said quickly, sensing her tension. "Just neighborly." She looked at him, then nodded. "All right." They walked together toward the cabin. She moved with care, still aware of her body but steadier than the day before. Inside, she added more wood to the fire. Tom stayed near the door, respectful of her space. "You ever think about moving closer to town?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." "Didn't think so," he said with a small smile. She studied him for a moment. "Why did you stop yesterday?" she asked. He considered the question. "Because I saw someone who needed help," he said simply, "and because I could." That answer felt honest. They talked more that day. Not deeply, but enough. He told her about the land to the east, about fences broken by snow, about cattle that needed checking once the paths cleared. She told him about the creek that flooded in spring, about the way the wind changed before storms. They shared knowledge, not feelings, and yet something grew quietly between them, a trust built on shared respect. Before he left, Tom looked at her carefully. "If you ever need help," he said, "you know where to find me." She nodded. "I do." Days passed. The snow began to melt slowly, turning white into gray, softening the edges of the world. Life returned in small ways. Birds came back. Tracks appeared in the snow. The land breathed again. Tom returned a few times, never unannounced, never staying too long. Sometimes he brought supplies. Sometimes he just checked in. She did the same when she traveled near his place, offering information about weather or animals moving through the area. Their connection remained quiet, steady. One afternoon, as they repaired a broken fence together, she spoke without planning to. "I wasn't always alone," she said. He paused, then waited. "I had family," she continued. "I lost them, not all at once, over time." "I'm sorry," he said. She nodded. "I learned to live without needing much." He looked at her. Needing less doesn't mean feeling less. She considered that. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with soft color, she realized something had changed. Not the land, not her strength, but her understanding. She was still independent, still capable, still strong. But she was also human, and humans were not meant to face every storm alone. That night, as she watched the fire burn steady and bright, she allowed herself to rest fully, knowing that somewhere beyond the snow-covered trees, someone else cared whether her fire stayed lit. And that made all the difference. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, like a careful promise. The snow pulled back a little more each day, leaving dark soil and patches of grass behind. Water ran again in the creek, soft and clear. The air still held cold at night, but the sharp bite of winter had loosened its grip. The Apache woman noticed the changes the way she always had, quietly, closely. She watched how the sun stayed longer in the sky. She listened for birds returning. She felt the earth soften under her boots. Life moved forward. Her days followed their familiar rhythm. She gathered wood, repaired what winter had broken, and prepared the land for warmer months. Strength still guided her hands, but now there was something else alongside it, ease, not comfort, not dependence, just ease. Tom continued to visit from time to time, never too often. Never without reason. Sometimes he brought news from town. Sometimes he came to trade supplies. Sometimes he just stopped by to check the weather together, standing side by side looking at the sky. They did not rush anything. There was no need. One afternoon, while she was working near the creek, she slipped on wet ground and caught herself just before falling. Her heart raced, more from surprise than fear. She stood still for a moment, breathing slowly, then laughed softly at herself. She realized something then. She was not afraid of getting hurt anymore, not because danger was gone, but because she no longer believed she would face it unseen. That thought stayed with her. A few days later, she rode into town for supplies. It was not something she did often. Town was loud, crowded, full of eyes that looked too long or not at all. But this time felt different. She moved through the streets with calm confidence, her shoulders straight, her steps steady. She saw Tom near the feed store. He looked surprised, then pleased. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. She smiled. "Neither did I." They walked together for a bit, talking about small things. She noticed people watching them, not with judgment but curiosity. She did not let it bother her. For the first time, she did not feel like she needed to explain herself to anyone. When she returned home that evening, she sat outside as the sun lowered behind the hills. The sky turned soft colors, gold, pink, deep blue. She breathed in the cool air and felt at peace. Her life was still quiet, still simple, still hers. Weeks passed. One morning, a storm rolled in suddenly, not snow, but rain and wind. Strong, fast, loud. The kind that tested roofs and trees. She secured what she could, then went inside and waited it out. As the rain fell hard against the cabin, she thought about the winter storm that had started it all. How close she had come to being overwhelmed. How one small moment had shifted everything. Not saved her, shifted her. When the storm ended, she stepped outside and saw a tree had fallen near the path. It blocked the way completely. She studied it calmly. She could handle it. It would take time, but she could do it. Before she began, she heard hooves. Tom rode up, slowing when he saw the fallen tree. "Looks like you've got some work," he said. "Yes," she replied. They looked at the tree together. Without a word, they got to work. There was no asking this time, no hesitation, no pride standing in the way. Just shared effort, smooth and natural. As they worked, she realized something important. Help did not mean weakness. Help did not erase strength. Help was simply another way of surviving. When the tree was cleared, they stood back and looked at the open path. "That should hold," Tom said. "Yes," she agreed. He wiped his hands on his coat and looked at her. "You ever think about teaching others what you know?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "There are people who don't understand this land," he said. "They come here thinking they can bend it to their will. They get hurt, or worse. Someone like you could teach them respect." She thought about that long after he left. The idea stayed with her through the evening, through the night, and into the next morning. In the days that followed, she found herself sharing knowledge more often. A word here, advice there, not lectures, just truth. People listened. Her voice carried weight, not because it was loud, but because it was honest. One evening, sitting by the fire, she reflected on her life. The losses, the winters, the silence she had wrapped around herself like armor. She still valued that armor, but she no longer lived inside it. She understood now that survival was not only about standing alone. It was also about knowing when to stand with someone else. As spring fully settled in, the land bloomed. Flowers pushed through the soil. Animals moved freely again. The world felt open. So did she. She remained who she had always been, strong, capable, grounded. But she had added something new to that strength. Connection, not dependence. Connection. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the fire burned steady, she stood outside her cabin and looked across the land she loved. The wind moved gently through the trees. The path was clear. She smiled, not because life was easy, but because she was ready for whatever came next. And somewhere not far away, a cowboy looked toward the same sky, knowing that in this wide and difficult world, respect and kindness still mattered. That knowledge, she realized, was its own kind of warmth, and it would last far longer than any winter.